The light in my kitchen had been broken for 6 weeks. Not the bulb. The bulb was fine. I had simply stopped replacing it because every time I asked my son-in-law Gary for the household money, he handed me 2 folded bills and told me it was not in the budget. $40. Sometimes $60. Never enough to buy groceries and a light bulb on the same trip. So I ate my meals in the dark. I told myself it was fine. I told myself Gary was handling things. I told myself that at 67 years old, maybe I did not understand how money worked anymore. Then my granddaughter showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon without calling first. She pushed it open, stepped inside, and stopped. She looked at the dark kitchen. She looked at the counter with nothing on it. She looked at me, sitting at the table with a glass of water and half a cracker, and her face changed in a way I had never seen before. "Grandma," she said slowly, "why is there no food?" I opened my mouth. Before I could answer, Gary walked out of the back hallway with his phone in his hand, and he smiled the way he always smiled. Easy, patient, like he had all the answers already arranged. "She forgets to make a list," he said pleasantly. "I keep telling her, write it down and I will get whatever she needs." My granddaughter looked at him. Then she looked at me. "Grandma gets $8,500 every month," she said, "from Dad's pension and her teacher retirement combined. Where is it going?" Gary's smile did not waver. "I manage her accounts now. It is easier that way. She had some confusion after her fall last year. She slipped on the porch steps," my granddaughter said flatly. "That was 14 months ago." "Still," Gary said. "Peace of mind." My granddaughter set her bag down on the table. She was 26 years old, and she had her mother's eyes, my late daughter Carol's eyes, and right then those eyes were very still and very serious. She reached up and pulled her hair back, twisting it into a knot. She did not look at Gary again. She looked only at me. "Grandma, how much money do you actually see each month?" I looked down at my hands. "Gary gives me what I need." "How much?" I swallowed. "He brings envelopes, usually around $80, sometimes $100. The room went quiet. I heard Gary shift his weight behind me. "That is spending money. Everything else is managed. Bills, insurance, investments. She is taken care of." My granddaughter pulled out a chair and sat directly across from me. "Investments," she repeated. "What investments?" Gary's voice stayed smooth. "A growth portfolio. Long-term planning. It is responsible financial management." "She is 67, my granddaughter said. "Her long-term is now." I had not heard anyone say that out loud before. I had thought it many times in the dark kitchen, eating crackers, telling myself I was being ungrateful. 67 is not old. 67 is not helpless. I taught school for 31 years. I balanced a classroom budget every September. I raised 2 children mostly alone after my husband passed. I knew what money looked like, but somehow in the past 18 months, I had stopped knowing where mine went. It started gently, the way these things always do. My daughter Carol died 2 years ago. Lung cancer, 44 years old. The kind of thing that splits a life cleanly in half. Gary was her husband. They had been married 11 years. He wore his grief openly, and I respected him for it. When he suggested moving into my house to help me through the first months, I was grateful. When he offered to handle the utilities and set up automatic payments, I said yes. When he sat across from this same table and slid a stack of papers toward me and said, "This just authorizes me to help manage transfers in case you ever need it," I signed without reading carefully. Carol had trusted him. That was enough for me. 18 months later, I was eating crackers in the dark. My granddaughter stood up from the table and walked to the refrigerator. She opened it the way you open something you already know will disappoint you. A jar of mustard. Half a bottle of salad dressing. Nothing else. "Gary," she said without turning around, "I need you to leave the room. This is my house," he said. "It is not," she replied. "It is Dorothy Harlan's house. She has lived here since 1989. Your name is not on the deed." There was a pause. "I am her family. So am I." She finally turned around. "And I am asking you to step outside while I talk to my grandmother privately." Gary looked at me. His expression shifted for just a moment. Something underneath the pleasantness. Something I had seen before and always pushed away. Then he nodded slowly, picked up his phone, and walked out the back door. The screen door clicked shut. My granddaughter came back to the table, and took both my hands the way you hold something you are afraid might break. Grandma, I need you to be honest with me right now. All of it. Whatever you are afraid to say. I stared at our hands. She had Carol's fingers too, long and steady. I do not know where my money goes, I said finally. I ask and he explains things I do not understand. Allocation, liquidity, portfolio rebalancing. He says the numbers are complicated and I worry too much. He says Carol would have wanted him to protect me. My granddaughter's jaw tightened. He uses her name, I said quietly. Whenever I push back. He says Carol trusted him with everything. Carol trusted him with her heart, my granddaughter said. Not with yours. I felt something loosen in my chest, thin and fragile, like a thread I had been holding too tight for too long. How long has this been happening? She asked. Since last spring. Maybe before. I stopped looking at statements because he said the online portal was confusing for older users, and he would print summaries. He never printed summaries. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Grandma, I need to ask you something serious. Do you remember signing any documents after Carol passed? I thought carefully. There had been many papers in those first months. Grief makes you sign things. Grief makes you trust people you might otherwise have questioned, because questioning feels like a betrayal of the person you lost. A few, I said. He said they were standard. Estate paperwork, beneficiary updates. Did any of them say power of attorney? I pressed my lips together. I do not remember the titles. She nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they already suspected the answer. She picked up her phone and typed something. Then she set it face down on the table. Tomorrow morning, she said. We are going to the bank together. You and me. Before Gary is awake. I felt the fear rise up immediately, the same fear that had kept me eating crackers for 14 months. Gary would be angry. Gary would say I was confused. Gary would invoke Carol's name and I would feel ashamed of myself for doubting the man my daughter had loved. What if he will not do anything, she said firmly, because tomorrow you are going to stand in front of a bank manager and say your own name and ask to see your own money, and nobody in that building can stop you. She slept on the couch that night. I lay in bed, listening to the house settle around me, and tried to remember when I had stopped feeling like it belonged to me. We left at 7:45 the next morning. I dressed carefully. I wore my good shoes. Gary's door was still closed when we walked out. The bank was 12 minutes away. My granddaughter drove and did not say much, which was fine. I did not need words. I needed to keep moving before the fear talked me into turning around. The branch manager's name was Patricia. She had reading glasses on a beaded chain and she shook my hand like she meant it. My granddaughter explained quietly that we needed to review full transaction records for the past 24 months. Patricia nodded and began typing. The silence in that small office felt very long. Then Patricia looked up from her screen. Her expression was careful, professional, but her eyes said something else. Mrs. Harlan, she said, your pension and retirement deposits total $8,500 each month, correct? Yes, I said. Over the past 22 months, there have been consistent transfers from your account to an external LLC. The transfers range from $6,000 to $8,000 each month. My granddaughter went very still beside me. What LLC? Patricia typed again. Harlan Legacy Partners. The name meant nothing to me. Then it meant something. Legacy. Gary had mentioned that word once. I had thought he was talking about Carol. What is the current balance in Mrs. Harlan's account? My granddaughter asked. Patricia hesitated for only a second. $214. I heard my granddaughter exhale slowly. $214. From 22 months of $8,500 deposits. The math moved through me like cold water. Over $180,000. Gone into something called Harlan Legacy Partners that I had never heard of and never agreed to. Is there a power of attorney on file? My granddaughter asked. There is, Patricia said. Dated 19 months ago. It authorizes a Gary Whitfield to manage accounts on behalf of Dorothy Harlan. Gary Whitfield. My dead daughter's husband. The man sleeping in my spare room right now. Patricia leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Harlan, I want to make sure I ask this directly. Were you fully informed of the scope of this authorization when you signed it? I looked at the table. No, I said. I was not. Patricia nodded once, and reached for a form. We filed a formal review request before 10 o'clock. Patricia explained that the business account connected to the transfers would be flagged. She explained that an investigation could take several weeks, but that my personal account would be placed under protected status immediately, meaning no further transfers could be authorized without my direct presence and written consent. She walked us out herself. At the door, she put her hand briefly on my arm. "You did the right thing coming in," she said quietly. "These situations are more common than people realize." I did not find that comforting, but I found it steadying. We were halfway home when my phone rang. "Gary." My granddaughter looked at the screen. "Answer it," she said. "Put it on speaker." I did. "Where are you?" His voice was different. The smoothness was gone. "I went to the bank," I said. Silence. Then, "Dorothy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever they told you in there, it is not the full picture. The transfers are part of a structured investment plan that Carol and I discussed before she passed. She wanted me to build something for the family. For you." My granddaughter's eyes narrowed. She did not speak. "Carol never mentioned this to me," I said. "She did not want to worry you. She knew you would not understand the technical side. We talked about it the last month she was in the hospital. She made me promise." I felt my throat tighten. That was exactly what he knew I could not argue with. The last month Carol was in the hospital. The weeks I had sat beside her bed and watched her disappear slowly. The conversations I was not part of. The promises I could not verify. My granddaughter reached over and touched my hand lightly. Just once. It was enough. "Gary," I said. "What is Harlan Legacy Partners?" Another silence. Longer this time. "It is the investment vehicle," he said. "It holds diversified assets in Carol's name, her legacy, her name," my granddaughter said clearly. "Carol Harlan Whitfield passed away. She cannot hold assets." Gary's voice went flat. "I am not talking to you. You are talking to us both," she replied. "And I want to know one thing. How much of my grandmother's money is in that LLC right now? And when does she get it back?" "That is not how investments work," Gary said. "You cannot just—" "How much?" she said again. A long pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "There have been operational costs. The portfolio needed to weather some volatility. Right now the liquid holdings are limited." "How much?" she said for the third time. His voice came through quiet and clipped. "Approximately $4,000. $4,000 from over $180,000. My granddaughter ended the call. She pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, and we sat for a moment without speaking. The house looked the same from the outside. White siding, blue shutters, the porch where I had slipped 14 months ago and given Gary the opening he needed. "He spent it," I said. "Not a question. Most of it," she said. "Or lost it. Or both." She looked at the house. "Grandma, I need to ask you something else. Did you ever sign anything related to this property? Any refinancing documents? Any equity agreements?" I thought carefully. "Last summer. Gary said the furnace was going to need replacement soon, and it made financial sense to access some equity for home improvement reserves. He had papers. I signed." My granddaughter pressed her eyes closed for just a moment. "We need an attorney today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today." I did not argue. The attorney's name was Susan Bell. Her office was in a low brick building 2 towns over, and she had been handling elder financial abuse cases for 19 years. My granddaughter had found her name before she ever came to my house that Tuesday. She had been planning this visit for 3 weeks, she told me later. She had noticed things in small phone calls. My voice getting quieter. My answers getting shorter. The way I had started saying "I have enough" whenever she offered to bring groceries. She had recognized it because her mother had recognized it too late. Susan reviewed the power of attorney document, the bank transfer records Patricia had printed, and the equity agreement Gary had presented last summer. She read carefully and did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "Dorothy, the power of attorney you signed is valid on its face. However, a power of attorney requires the agent to act in the principal's best interest, systematically draining over $180,000 from a fixed-income retiree's accounts into a private LLC with minimal return and no clear benefit to you is not acting in your interest. That is financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. In this state, that is a criminal charge. The word criminal sat in the room. He was my daughter's husband, I said. Yes, Susan said. And he used your grief as an opening. I looked at the window. Outside, a maple tree was dropping the last of its leaves. I had watched that tree from this office window in autumn once before, years ago, when I was updating my own will after my husband died. I remembered feeling very capable that day. Very clear. What about the equity agreement? My granddaughter asked. Susan's expression shifted. That is the more urgent matter. Gary refinanced approximately $95,000 of equity on your property. The lender's paperwork lists Harlan Legacy Partners as the beneficiary of the funds. If the LLC has no assets and Gary cannot make payments, the lender has legal standing to pursue the property itself. The property. My house. The place I had painted myself in 1994. The kitchen where Carol learned to bake bread. The porch where I taught both my grandchildren to identify birds. Can I lose it? I asked plainly. Potentially, Susan said. Without legal intervention. Yes. I thought about Gary sleeping in my spare room. I thought about him standing in my hallway that first night after Carol's funeral, holding a casserole someone had brought, telling me I did not need to worry about anything. I had believed him because I needed to believe him, because losing Carol had taken something out of me that I did not know how to replace. And Gary had stepped into that space and called it family. What do I do? I asked. Susan placed both hands flat on the table. We move quickly. We file to revoke the power of attorney immediately. We report the financial exploitation to the state attorney's office. We contact the lender and disclose that the equity agreement was signed under misrepresentation of terms. And we notify Gary that he is no longer permitted in your home. My granddaughter looked at me. I thought about Gary's voice on the phone. Carol wanted me to build something for the family. I thought about how he had used her name like a key every time I got close to asking the right question. Carol was gone. She could not tell me what she actually said in that hospital room, but she had raised me for 18 years and I had raised her for 22, and I knew my daughter. Carol was practical. Carol kept spreadsheets. Carol would never have told her husband to quietly drain her mother's pension for 18 months while her mother ate crackers in a dark kitchen. Carol would have told me herself. Do it, I said. Gary's car was gone when we returned to the house. Whether he had left on his own or had already been warned by someone, I did not know. His room was half emptied, clothes taken, toiletries gone, the framed photo of Carol removed from the bedside table. He had left her wedding album on the floor. I picked it up. I sat on the edge of the bed he had slept in for 18 months, in the house my husband and I had bought in 1989, and I held my daughter's wedding album on my lap. I looked at Carol in her dress, laughing at something just off camera. I looked at Gary beside her, looking at her the way someone looks at something they genuinely love. Maybe he had loved her. I believe he had. I do not think love protects you from what fear and pride and debt can turn a person into. My granddaughter stood in the doorway. Come on, she said gently. Susan called. The state investigator wants to speak with you this afternoon. I set the album carefully on the bed. I would put it somewhere proper later, somewhere it belonged. The investigator's name was Thomas, and he was younger than I expected. He took notes by hand in a small black notebook. He asked quiet, specific questions and never once suggested I should have known better or acted sooner. When I told him about the papers I had signed and the way Gary had used Carol's memory to stop my questions, he nodded without surprise. This pattern is very consistent, he said. Isolation, gradual financial removal, leveraging grief or loyalty. The perpetrator rarely presents as threatening. They present as helpful. He was helpful, I said. In the beginning. They usually are, he said. That is how it works. After I finished speaking, Thomas looked at his notes for a moment. Then he looked up. Mrs. Harlan, are you willing to cooperate fully with a criminal investigation? I thought about the maple tree outside Susan's window. I thought about Carol learning to bake bread. I thought about $80 in an envelope slid across my kitchen table while my own account held $8,500 that I never saw. Yes, I said. Whatever you need. The next weeks were not simple. I will not pretend they were. Gary hired an attorney. His attorney sent letters suggesting the transfers had been consensual and that the power of attorney documentation was clear. Susan replied with the transaction records, the equity filing, and a detailed timeline showing that I had received less than 2% of my own deposited funds as direct household money during the period in question. She also filed the complaint with the State Elder Financial Abuse Office. My granddaughter stayed with me. She fixed the kitchen light on the second day. She stocked the refrigerator. She sat with me in the evenings and did not push me to talk, but was there when I needed to. One night, I told her about a moment I had not told anyone. Early in Gary's time in the house, maybe 3 months after Carol died, I had looked at a bank statement he left on the counter and noticed the balance was lower than I expected. I had mentioned it. He had looked at me with such patient, quiet sorrow and said, "You are still grieving, Dorothy. Numbers can look strange when we are grieving. Let me handle this for you." And I had let him, because I was grieving, and because being told I could rest had felt like kindness. My granddaughter listened to all of it. Then she said, "He counted on you feeling guilty for questioning him." "Yes," I said, "that is not your weakness. That was his strategy." The investigation took 8 weeks. At the end of those 8 weeks, Gary Whitfield was charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraudulent misappropriation of funds under power of attorney, and filing a home equity agreement under materially false representations. The LLC had no real assets. The money had gone toward a failed short-term real estate venture Gary had been running independently and had never disclosed. When the venture collapsed, he had continued taking from my account to cover personal expenses and to maintain the appearance of managing a portfolio. There was no Carol-inspired legacy. There was no family investment. There was a man who had lost money, panicked, and used a grieving woman's trust to solve his own problems while calling it love. The lender, when presented with the state investigator's findings, agreed to void the equity agreement on the grounds of misrepresentation. The house remained mine. An asset recovery process was initiated to pursue the funds Gary had deposited into the LLC before they were spent. I did not recover everything. That is the truth. Of the $180,000 transferred, the recovery process identified roughly $61,000 in traceable assets. The rest was gone into bad investments and personal spending, and could not be retrieved. I had to sit with that number for a while. My granddaughter sat with me while I did. "It is not nothing," she said carefully, "but it is not enough." "No," I said. "It is not enough. Are you angry?" I looked at my kitchen. The light was on. The refrigerator was full. There was soup on the stove because I had made it myself that afternoon, the first time I had cooked something real in longer than I wanted to count. "I am something," I said. "I am not sure anger covers it. I was angry. But I was also something quieter and harder to name. The feeling of having been turned small inside your own life, and then slowly remembering you were never actually small at all." The power of attorney was revoked the same week the charges were filed. I had a new financial advisor now, one I had selected myself, one whose name and credentials I had checked independently before our first meeting. My accounts were restored to my sole access. Direct deposit resumed. I received my first full statement in 22 months and sat at the kitchen table and read every line. On the day Gary's arraignment was scheduled, I did not go to the courthouse. I had given my statement. I had done my part. I did not need to watch. Instead, I called a friend I had not seen in almost 2 years, a woman I had stopped making plans with because Gary always said it was not in the budget. I called her and told her I wanted to go to lunch. She asked if I was free on Thursday. I said I was. My granddaughter came over that evening. I had made dinner, a real dinner, chicken and roasted carrots and the cornbread I used to make every Sunday when Carol and her brother were young. We ate at the kitchen table with the overhead light on. After dinner, she helped me wash the dishes, and I thought about what I wanted to say to her and how to say it properly. "You came before you had proof," I said finally. "You came because you noticed something was wrong in my voice on the phone, and you trusted that feeling, even when I was telling you everything was fine." She dried a bowl and did not say anything yet. "Nobody had done that for a long time," I said. "Noticed and come." She set the bowl down. "I should have come sooner," she said quietly. "I noticed things 6 months before I showed up. I kept telling myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe she would tell me if it was really bad. I would not have," I said honestly. "I was too ashamed." "I know," she said. "That is why I finally stopped waiting for you to say something. We stood in the kitchen for a moment, the two of us, and I thought about how Carol would have done exactly the same thing, would have shown up on a Tuesday without calling, would have looked at an empty refrigerator and set her bag down on the table and pulled her hair back, would have stayed. There is something I want to say to anyone listening who has been in a dark kitchen telling themselves it is fine, telling themselves they are not sure enough to ask questions, telling themselves the person managing things probably knows best. You know your own name. You know your own account number. You are allowed to walk into a bank and ask to see your own money. Not next week. Not when things are calmer. Now, the people who want to keep you confused need you to believe you are too old, too emotional, too recently hurt to understand your own finances. That belief is not the truth. That belief is a tool. It belongs to them, not to you. I taught 31 years of school. I balanced budgets and raised children and planted that garden every spring for 4 decades. I slipped on my own porch steps once and it did not change any of that. A kind voice offering to handle things is not the same as someone handling things in your interest. That difference matters more than I can say. I learned it the hard way. The soup on my stove smells like the soups I made when Carol was little and came home cold from school and sat right here in this kitchen and told me everything about her day. The light is on. The refrigerator is full. And if you are sitting somewhere right now in the dark, I need you to know that the darkness is not permanent. Sometimes it just means someone turned off the switch without asking you. And you are allowed, at any age, at any hour, to walk over and turn it back on yourself. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or something you have been afraid to name, please share it. Leave a comment. Tell someone, because sometimes the most important thing we can do for each other is simply refuse to look away.